Alright, how's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining me on a new episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week on the Music Reviewer Podcast. My name is Josh, for the week of April 24th. And yes, I know if you're paying attention, this is coming out a bit late. I had a bit of like an eventful weekend, sort of. Not that that's important. But yeah, I hope everyone's doing well, and thanks for, once again, tuning in to Best and Worst Track of the Week. If you're new to Best and Worst Track of the Week, all Best and Worst Track of the Week is a weekly segment where I take all new entries into the Billboard Hot 100, grade each of them with a letter grade, and take one that's the worst, and then one that's the best. This week is filled with some interesting stuff overall. A mini album bomb from Taylor Swift. And I'm sure you know, if you're semi-conscious and not living under a rock, she re-released Fearless and re-recorded it with her own cuts because she doesn't own legally the final masters of the original album, which is a whole issue in itself. But, here it is. Of course it was popular. But also we got some stuff from 21 Pilots, Kevin Gates, I think, first time these artists are featured on the podcast. Also Doja Cat and SZA, Polo G. If that interests you in the slightest, stick around. I'm doing some track reviews from those artists. And yeah, pretty good week this week. Not much of a chore to get through it. In comparison to last week, I will say, probably the general quality, like the general consensus of what came out, in my opinion, is just, it's a bit more positive. Nothing I really hated this week. If anything, I was just lukewarm on some stuff, and I really dug the best track this week. Alright, so first track that came in this week is Taylor Swift with The Way I Loved You, Taylor's version at 94. On this track, I'm digging the organic added string orchestration on here and instrumentation. The opening guitar riff is a bit of a surprise as well. I thought it was pretty energetic and prominent. There's also some thin melodic mini guitar interludes that were added in as well that are a bit brief. But anyways, an overall genuine live sound to the production and instrumentation. Not bad on that front. The track is pretty straightforward. It's kind of like the pop rock side of Taylor Swift. When she executes it right, it's not bad. I give it a B. Next track, Shy Away by 21 Pilots, 87. Officially maybe the first track I'm covering on this podcast ever of 21 Pilots. I will say as of late, like, there's stuff lately, ever since they released that one album with like the yellow album cover, a few years ago, the stuff has been sticking with me a bit more. I don't know if it's because they're kind of just embracing a certain sound. But this track definitely has like a sense of alt rock to it with like a lot of syncopated rhythmic ideas and clean guitars. Also, it sounds just pretty clean in general. Every texture and voice is quite clear. Very Strokes-like as well, especially with the tight mechanical drumming. It feels like it's kind of cut and paste from that sort of thing on any given Strokes song that has that sort of drumming going on. The bridge is a nice change with the breakdowns and the grit too. It's just a bit brief, but the track's solid overall. I didn't have a problem with it. I give it a B+. Next track, Big Gangsta by Kevin Gates at 81. First time I'm pretty sure covering Kevin Gates on here. Other than Two Phones, I don't really know much of his discography. But Gates's husky delivery is pretty fitting over this beat. I dig the dreamy and murky melodic elements in the instrumental. The flow is pretty captivating all throughout, and it's energetic at least. And also, there's some nice melodic ideas thrown in the chorus as well. It's a bit hooky. I give this track a B. Next track off of Taylor's version at 75, You Belong With Me. If you were alive in the early 2010s or late 2000s, you know this track. It was inescapable, especially with how unique it was at the time, with it blowing up essentially as a pop hit for Taylor, when originally it was obviously a country song. But there was a sort of like remix or recut that made it more poppier, and it was played all over basically top 40 radio. This is the track redone again. This version definitely has hints of maturity. Taylor's vocals are a bit more relaxed and refined. There's a big drum sound, quote unquote, that makes the track have a lot of presence. I love the little guitar embellishments thrown in on this track. It holds true to the original cut, in my opinion, but with just a little bit more swag. Taylor just sounds like she's just like this wise, mature artist at this point, kind of just putting a nice little touch on these tracks, and just like a slightly different way. The track just has a bit of a brighter color as well, so I give this track a B. Next track, Fearless, Taylor's version at 71. Another classic Taylor cut, obviously with it being from this album, the title track of the album. And like I said on the last track, you definitely hear the maturity here. It's quite clear on this verse. Her vocal tone on this track is just a bit huskier. It just sounds like a different artist almost, but it's still the same Taylor. The production style makes it sound a bit more present as well, kind of like a late 90s to 2000s country flavor, like a Shania Twain type of thing. I love the typical country twang on the guitar that this track featured, especially in the solos. Some nice warm bass tones that come through with some melodic flavor at times. Solid track, I give it a B. Alright, so next track, Kiss Me More, featuring SZA, by Doja Cat at number 7. Kind of surprised this track kind of came in as high, even though I guess these two are big names at this point. And I am surprised that with them respectively being modern R&B artists, they are still a bit different in terms of like the overall aesthetic they present on most tracks. So yeah, interesting collab. The track is essentially a dancey R&B cut structured by what I think is a thin guitar sample, where we get rapper Doja coming in on here. Her rapping is not bad on here, and also her whispery vocals fit in quite nicely as well. The track seems to aim to have like a sort of punchiness to it as well. It's a nice sounding track. Not sure if it's memorable though, even though these two artists are, good in themselves. I just don't know if like it's something that we're going to be remembering a few years from down the road. So I give this track a B. Next track, Rap Star by Polo G at number 1. This one's a head scratcher. Even though this song is essentially just like a modern day trap song that you would expect to do well on the charts, given especially it's done by Polo G, who seems to be in and out of the charts every so often. But this track, it just like, it lacks a sort of unique flavor or signature sound to it, where you would be like, oh yeah, that's Polo G. Had I not known this was Polo G, I think I would have had a hard time really picking out who this artist was when I first listened to it. And there's some issues to it. I don't like the knocky snare on this beat. It's a bit unpleasant to hear every other beat. The back and forth between the singing and the rapping is done quite smoothly. It's done with a bit of technical prowess, but the delivery can just be a little bit monotonous, little to no angst coming from Polo G. The guitar loop on this beat can be a bit played out as well. It's just a bit annoying after a while. I'm not sure how to feel about this track overall, because it's not terrible, but I don't know what's giving it its prominence other than maybe it's doing well on TikTok. That seems to be the explanation to unknowns at this point. But yeah, I give this track a C+. And yeah, now we are at that point where I just give you the best orange track of the week. Given that this is like a mini album bomb, quote unquote, it was to no surprise to me that we'd get a best track of the week from Taylor Swift, but unfortunately she has a worst track of the week. But in no way, shape, or form is this track awful. I just didn't find it to be all that stand out, especially in the context of this reissue. This track is 15, Taylor's version. And, the track just keeps a lot of its original charm, which I guess isn't a bad thing on a paper, but it's not the most exciting track to remake as well. You can sort of sense that the original anthemic nature that this track had naturally to it isn't really being sold as hard by Taylor on this cut. If I had to guess, when she decided to, redo Fearless, she might have been rolling her eyes at having to re-record this and re-perform this. But I do dig the natural instrumentation for the most part that's being presented on here, the mandolins and guitars. But yeah, the track is just a bit too similar to the original. And at the end of the day, I think it was maybe done a little bit reluctantly, but that's just my thoughts. But best track of the week, Forever and Always by Taylor Swift, Taylor's version. This track has been a banger since day one, especially with the original cut. I'll admit it, even when I was a teenage boy, this was my guilty pleasure, this track. I don't know when I first was exposed to it. I will say that Taylor's earlier work I was a fan of. You know, I'm sure most people can say that when they're my age, especially around that time. This is like late middle school, early high school. But yeah, this track just came out swinging even harder. The track keeps its original pop nature, but just a bit more angstier. The drum track is even a bit angstier as well. It made this particular cut that much greater. The sound is just big and warm at times as well. The sliding melodic bass line stuck around just as nicely and played with a little bit more, for lack of a better term, pizzazz. The rich vocal harmonizations are excellent as well. The gritty guitar solo is a nice touch to this version, and the crackles in her voice even, those little things, stick out great. And it just makes this track in combination with like Taylor's legacy just all that more special. So, congrats to Taylor on putting out an even better version of an already great song. I'm sure that's not easy to do. So yeah, best track of the week goes to Forever and Always, by Taylor Swift. And yeah, if you stuck around with me to the end of this episode, thanks for listening to this episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week on the Music Reviewer Podcast. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe if you like what you heard. Also give some feedback, good or bad, if you want. And then also subscribe on your preferred listening service. Nonetheless, that's all for this week. I'll see you guys later.